Today, it's the Cape Town Import Race presented by V&A Waterfront, the second import challenge of the 14th edition of the Ocean Race. Our 5 teams have enjoyed the spirited welcome here in Cape Town since arriving 12 days ago after a 7,000-mile journey south to the tip of Africa. Docking here in the harbour, a welcome end to the last leg, but also a significant moment as once again Cape Town becomes home to the Ocean Race fleet as a stopover city, acting as our gateway into the Southern Ocean. Cape Town has been a feature of the race in 12 of our 14 editions, starting all the way back in 1973. Today, it's the import race and our sailors are ready for action. Well, the conditions out on the water are looking perfect. The wind coming in just to the left of Table Mountain, and that will keep some consistency in the breeze. But of course, we've had quite the action to get here. Leg 1 and 2 took the fleet south here to Cape Town. 5 more legs to go. And with the breeze today looking good for an import race, these sailors are desperate to get as many points as they can. This could feature strongly in the tiebreak of the overall scoreboard.
Next up is a record-breaking leg, the longest racing distance in the 50-year history of the race. 12,750 nautical miles, a 1-month marathon through the Southern Ocean from Cape Town to Itajaí, Brazil. This leg is worth double points, so it's crucial for teams to get it right. After the stop in Brazil, the boats head north across the equator and up to Newport on the east coast of the United States. The boats return to Europe on another double points leg with a transatlantic crossing to Aarhus, Denmark, followed by a flyby in Kiel, Germany, en route to The Hague in the Netherlands, and finally into the Mediterranean with the grand finale, this offshore leg to Genova, Italy.
And joining me in commentary is Dee Kafari, 2-time skipper in the Ocean Race and renowned round-the-world sailor. And, I mean, Dee, it is looking pretty good out there for racing.
Absolutely fabulous conditions, great wind, flat water. The spectators are in for something really special today.
And I hope you guys are as well, because we've got cameras on board these boats. But before we get into that, let's take a look at our teams and get to know them a little bit better. First up, Team Holtham PRB. Now, they are sitting at the top of the overall leaderboard, but at the bottom of the import trophy. Skipper Kevin Escoffier will need to find some form in the tight cornering racetrack today to improve their chances in these short races. 11th Hour Racing Team and skipper Charlie Enright, they were slick around the racetrack in Alicante. This crew having spent many months sailing together and honing their skills. Coordination that's proved effective on the import races so far. Team Milizia hammered the rest of the field in the Alicante import race, leaving them all to drift across the line as Boris Herman and his team finished with a huge lead. But the conditions for our race today are set to be very different, and perhaps they won't be that lucky in Cape Town. Paul Mayer's Biotherm is a team made up of offshore sailors, but Damien Sagan also boasts 3 Paralympic medals, and that's the experience needed on this short style racetrack. If they can translate their offshore experience into tight course racing, this team could finish strong today. A similar story with Guyot Environment Team Europe, who have Olympians Annie Lush and Robert Stanjek on board, both of them competing in the London 2012 Games. But of course, rounded off with solo sailors Benjamin Dutroux and Sebastian Simon. Can this team do better than their 4th place finish in Alicante? Well, the standings here for our 5 teams, the positions for the moment in the import race, and of course we've only had 1 import race completed so far all the way back in Alicante, but Team Milizia in the lead so far. But early days, and in fact 5 points awarded to the winner of each import race, so perhaps some big movement on the leaderboard after today's racing. There we have the race control boat getting ready to begin the countdown.
1 minute to the preparatory signal.
All right, 1 minute to go before the 5-minute countdown. 5-minute countdown started. 1 minute to the preparatory signal. And I mean, I'm looking at those flags at the moment, Dee. There's always a question when you're racing in Cape Town as to where you're going to be and are you going to be in the best of the breeze. But it looks good, at least for the start line.
Well, the flags are flying out straight. There's really good breeze on that start line. But we know from Table Bay that we get stuck in these shifts and these patches of really, really strong, accelerated wind. And then we have the lighter conditions. So the sailors are really going to be tested to just see if they can keep that momentum going through that difficult transition zones that they're going to face on this course.
And I know that this is an area that you've raced in well yourself, skippering Turn the Tide on Plastic in the last edition of the Ocean Race. Of course, for these Moccas, they are new, they are a little bit different, a boat still that you do have some experience with. And Team Wholesome BRB right now, I mean, if you needed a team to cheer, this boat has been very strong offshore, but lacking on the inshore trophy.
Well, as they say, these boats are about 4 winches, 4 people and multiple corners. It's just a case of survival a lot of the time, but they can't help themselves. They're severely competitive. They want to win all the time.
Well, let's have a look at what the racetrack is going to be for the Cape Town import race presented by V&A Waterfront. It is going to be a square course right in front of the city here, beginning with a reaching start. That is going to put the boats right up to speed as soon as the gun fires. From there, well, it's a chance for our teams to outsmart their rivals before everything gets tricky, as multiple corners will test our sailors' ability to adapt and find the perfect balance between, well, speed and manoeuvrability. Well, Dee, as I say, Table Mountain, it's a big feature here visually, but it is a big feature in the wind as well. Do we think that it's going to cause some inconsistency with the breeze?
Well, the forecast was for south-southwesterly, and we've heard that it's turned a little bit further left. But Table Mountain's the main feature, but we can see in this image now we've got Lion's Head, which is just a feature on the racecourse as well, and it allows that wind to funnel around, causing areas of acceleration. And it really is a case of all or nothing on this racecourse. 1 minute they'll be dealing with multiple knots of wind, and then the next bit they might be becalmed. And they're trying to do manoeuvres in this and sail changes, so it's super tricky.
And for the moment, at least, we're not risking any becalming at the start line, because as we go on board with Kevin Escoffer and Team Wholesome PRB, you can see that the 3 boats here are all reefed. They've reduced their mainsail size because they think that there's excessive power at the start line. There's almost too much wind. So tuning that boat for that breeze. Just on board here with Kevin, one eye behind with 11th Hour Racing Team. And it's interesting, Dee, there's a lot of manoeuvrability there. There's a lot of jostling for position, and it looks like Team Wholesome PRB wants to be to leeward here.
Well, they're trying to get that ideal position. They want to line up so that they can control the racecourse. They want to be to weather of everybody so that they can get the wind that's clean and leave everybody else with their dirty wind from their sails. So they're all trying to push each other out the way and make sure they've got control of that start line.
It looked like there was a mark just getting in the way here. I think that's Mark 3. It's not a mark at the moment, but it almost looked like perhaps Biotherm just in the distance there might have just hooked that mark. And indeed, they turn up to turn out of the way. We'll have to wait to see. But right now, Guyot coming down from Windward, just crossing the bows of the other. And there we go, confirmation as we go on board with Biotherm. That foil, I mean, the sailors, they're so used to looking in front. I mean, we see this a lot. There's so much sticking out the side of these boats. They have hooked up Mark 3 on the racetrack. It's not a starting mark, so there shouldn't be a penalty for doing this, but it does mean that effectively right now they are anchored to the floor, and they can't just pull themselves off here, Dee. They need to take care of that foil.
No, that's right. It's attached to the foil. We saw that there. So they were coming up to stay out of the way of Wholesome PRB and 11th Hour Racing, and Biotherm landed on that mark. Now, they had it on the foil, and they've got to get disconnected so they can get back for their start. Maybe they can ask for a delay.
Four of our mockers about to cross the start line here at the beginning of the import race in Cape Town. And Guyot Environment Team Europe certainly bow forward. How close to the line they were. Well, there we go, reaching all the way over the top of 11th Hour Racing Team. We've seen Charlie Enright getting those starts wrong before at the pin end. And once again, the Americans are on the back foot. Wholesome PRB, look at that to windward. They are up on the foils. They've already got that boat tuned and flying. take care now to see the bow. Does it dip back down? Do they come back down, crashing down? But the difference in speed here of that windward boat, they've taken the breeze now of Robert Stanczyk and Benjamin Dutroux. Guyot Environment Team Europe is languishing behind, and that goes to show the power of starting to windward.
Definitely. Now, Guyot Environment had Olympians on board. That's why their time on distance was so good. But it's the pure speed of Holcim Team PRB that really has shown the rest of the fleet.
Incredible flying here from Team Holcim PRB, but when that bow comes up that high, that is not necessarily fast. And you can see in the corner of your screen here the onboard shot of Kevin Escoffier, and he's holding on to the tiller, but he's also holding on to the guard wire as well, because that will be quite the ride. We're used to boats pitching up and down, but these boats heave, lift, roll, all sorts of manoeuvres as those foils kick in. But the lead that they have pulled out, barely this race has been running for 1 minute. Team Holcim PRB are finally doing everything right in the import race. Remember, this boat didn't even manage to score a point in the import race in Alicante. They were timed out after stalling in the light winds. Kevin Escoffier is certainly putting those demons to rest. Great sailing here from Team Holcim PRB, really nicely on the foils. And I mean, Dee, for me, this boat looks set up. It looks like it is tuned pretty well.
Well, straight line sailing they're good at. They've got good boat speed, but now they've got that lead, so now they need to perfect this manoeuvre around the mark. It's all about not making mistakes. They've got time. They need to not panic and do this nice and simply.
This is where it can all go wrong. This yellow and white mark here. This will be a left turn for them. As we look at it at the moment, they will disappear off the screen to the right. And Team Holcim PRB, you can see holding high of the direct line to that mark. That's because they know that as they bear away and start pointing toward that mark, the boat is going to lift up. They're going to hit that magical angle where the boat powers up, and they need to give themselves that wiggle room. Behind them, the battle for second place is pretty fierce, but this is exactly the lead that Team Holcim PRB needs to have right now. They can just take care to manoeuvre around this buoy carefully. That's why you're seeing the wide turn. One crew member on the bow, I believe that was Sam Goodchild, holding out the hand signals for the back, but also with comms on board. They'll be communicating with the helm. And now it looks like they have held that course from that mark. So they are pretty confident that there's best breeze in front. We know they're going to have to jibe before getting round the next mark. But now finally they bear away. And just look at the distance there between, well, I mean, Guyot Environment Team Europe perhaps in second place.
So listening in on Holcim PRB, they're about to go for a manoeuvre.
Watch the top of the J3, watch the top of that forward sail. It needs to unfurl neatly. We have seen boats get bad furls before, and as you're seeing now with Guyot Environment Team Europe coming round Mark 1, they've elected to steer a much more efficient course with 11th Hour Racing Team on the inside. That means that Charlie Enright is lined up to attack on the jibe. Right now, I don't think that Benjamin Dutroux and Robert Stanczyk can jibe there. They're going to have to wait for Charlie Enright to do the manoeuvre first.
Is this an opportunity now with 11th Hour Racing keeping Guyot Environment Team Europe out of a jibe for Malizia to come in on the inside?
It's certainly looking like Team Malizia is trying to sail low. They're trying to put that bow down as we go on board now. And we can see Benjamin Dutroux. They've seen 11th Hour Racing Team setting up for the jibe.
I think we might see some synchronised sailing here with the jibes in synchronisation as they both turn.
There we go. One jibes, the other follows. Guyot Environment Team Europe, they know that because they let in 11th Hour Racing Team onto their leeward side and Charlie Enright got the inside turn at Mark 1, it was going to play out this way. There was nothing really that Guyot Environment Team Europe could do. The rotation would naturally put 11th Hour Racing Team on top. But as you're saying, Dee, look at Team Malizia here. If Team Malizia can get some breeze and sail down to Mark 2, they might also slip inside.
Well, we can see the different colours on the water. This is a clear indication of the different strength of wind they've got out there. They're trying to link those dark patches together so they can stay in consistency. But Team Militia seem to be struggling with speed, and it's 11th Hour that's controlling this little trio that we're looking at.
There's breeze behind, there's breeze to windward, but it is going to come too late for Boris Herrmann. Team Militia, they jibed much earlier than 11th Hour Racing Team and GUI Environment Team Europe, and if the breeze had been there, they'd have been able to sail down and take the breeze of at least Benjamin Dutroux and Robert Stanjek's boat. But as it happens right now, Team Militia are round Mark II in 4th place. Bear in mind, we haven't yet seen Biotherm starting at the moment. We, of course, just before the start, saw them get hooked up with Mark III. Indeed, that's the mark now that these boats are going to. Team Militia have been in this position before. They have been at the back at the import races, but that was in light winds in Alicante when they managed to slip themselves through and finish in quite an incredible lead as we go on board now to see how they're working the boat.
Of all people, this team know that it's not over until they cross that finish line. They've been in this position before, as you say, at the back and came to the front. So they're not going to give up. We've got 3 laps potentially with this race if conditions hold. So they're going to keep working, keep chasing.
And they're having to work pretty hard here. I mean, this is a steep learning curve for Axel Poulin, stepping in to replace Rosalind Kuiper, who has got the flu, stepping out for this race. But even Boris Herrmann just coming off the tiller, coming off the helm to come and join on the pumps, because on this reach, this is a chance to get going as they sail back into the breeze. Team Holcim PRB at the moment, look at this boat sailing a little bit more, pointing a little bit more to the left-hand side of our picture. That means they've got the wind. If any of these boats is sailing to the right, that means they're pointing away from the next mark, but they're doing so in search of power. Team Holcim PRB are finding the breeze at every single corner of this racetrack.
They are. They're a little flat here now. You can just see it's gone a little bit light, but we can see how close that next mark is to them. So it's not long before they do the next manoeuvre. And we saw the jibe at the last time between marks 2 and 3. So now we're going to see them tack as they go round the other end of the square of this course.
And this is where the reefs, I think, come into play here, because, of course, as sailors, we always talk about setting up for the lulls, setting up for the gusts, setting up when the wind is either at its strongest or at its weakest. And for these sailors, they seem to have set the boats up for when it's at its strongest. Right now, I'm sure they'll all be thinking, oh, if I could snap my fingers and have the full main up, I would.
Well, you said it there. They just can't go through that process of putting reefs in and out during this short course. They've got to set up for the average and then just concentrate on clean manoeuvres. Making less mistakes is what's going to keep them ahead, and that's what we're seeing with Holcim Team PRB. They've had some great boat speed and they're controlling that race course, controlling their lead. They just need a clean manoeuvre at this next mark.
We are coming to the end of that bottom reach. We have nearly sailed 3 sides of this square, and the race committee today setting up for 3 laps. They can shorten it if the teams don't sail the course in the allotted time. But for Team Holcim PRB, this was the boat that didn't manage to finish. They were so far behind the leaders in Alicante that they were timed out. And in a moment, they are going to come to the point on the import course where it all went wrong for them. It was the tack. The tack and the jib, the foresail, got snagged and they just stalled out. And I don't care how experienced a racer you are, I am absolutely certain that you would need to get through that tack to just feel that little bit of weight coming off your shoulders. Right now, Team Holcim PRB have got an incredible lead, but we have got plenty more corners to go.
Now they're coming up with the breeze.
Here.
You can see
Dee, I was just going to say, Dee, sorry, I was just going to say, because you know these boats so well, I mean, flying that high, what is it like being on board and trying to hold on?
Well, we talk about wearing life jackets at sea, but you feel like you need a parachute because you're riding that much higher above the water. It takes a while to get used to it, and I think that's where the momentum that we're struggling with them talking about life on board. But what's really difficult, you saw them flying high and then you saw them crash down. That's what they want to avoid.
Yeah, that's when the speed gets scrubbed. That's when they haven't quite got the balance in the boat. And it's so tricky because, of course, a big factor as to how well your foil works is how fast you're going. And if they're sailing in from lulls to gusts, if they're getting more and less power, that speed is going to change. And trimming a sail is one thing. Trimming a foil quickly is quite something else. But Team Holcim PRB now round Mark 3 and going upwind. We're not expecting the high speeds on this upwind section, but Team Holcim PRB need to put in a smooth tack just to make sure that they will be completing a full lap of this import course. And all the teams at the moment seem to be sailing with the J2 sail. And I would say, Dee, I mean, you're an Amoca sailor, but from what I know, the J2 does make manoeuvring a little bit easier.
It does. It moves through that forward triangle without too much stress. There are some battens in it, which is why they tend to struggle on the jibe, getting that through cleanly. But it makes the tack much quicker, much easier for the teams. Now we've got the 3 boats coming down. We've got 11th hour of racing coming down to that mark, and then they're going to slowly come up on the breeze. They're in good pressure here. You can see them heeling nicely, and then that's going to increase. And this is where Holcim PRB actually slowed down a little.
It just goes to show the difference in the breeze. I mean, you've got 11th Hour Racing Team, Guyo Environment Team Europe, Team Milizia, and they're all at different stages of heel. They're only a few boat lengths apart, but the wind for them very different. And you just saw Charlie Enright on the helm of 11th Hour Racing Team take the boat a little bit too high as they came round that mark. But that was tactically. Compare that course with Guyo Environment Team Europe now coming round. 11th Hour Racing Team sacrificed speed there to get into a strong windward position. And actually, Charlie Enright seems to be the boat that is not relying on speed so much, but rather taking those little tactical manoeuvring and sort of gaining position on their rivals. That's the way that Charlie Enright seems to be sailing this course.
Taking the advantage from a shorter distance and more direct course. It's risky, but rounding a mark, you always want to try and come in wide and come out close. And that's the secret to mark rounding. But these guys are actually thinking about setting themselves up for the next mark. And the next thing they have to do is this manoeuvre, the tack towards the next mark.
We can compare the rounding with 11th Hour Racing Team with Guyo Environment Team Europe, but for Kevin Escoffia on board Team Holcim PRB, everything that's going on behind them is a long way back. We are on board at the moment with Team Holcim PRB as Team Milizia now coming round, and look at the difference in breeze. We've got Team Holcim PRB at the top of your picture reaching away. Guyo Environment Team Europe now on that slightly slower upwind leg, and watch for those darker patches coming in from the right hand side. The coastline low right now for that top reach, and Team Holcim PRB about to sail through the start finish line to complete lap 1, and so far this race is going perfectly for them.
Well, this is only going to gain for them now because everybody else is on that slow upwind leg and they're powering off, reaching down. It's just the rich get richer. So he's going to have a smile on the inside, but he knows he's still got a lot of corners to turn, and he's got to get it right to keep that lead.
Interesting to see how the teams have set their boats up for the demands of manoeuvring. Both foils seem to be out all the time. There's no point wasting that energy retracting, extending foils. You know that corner's going to come quick because, well, you're doing 20 odd knots.
That's right. And if people are wondering who else is on board the boat, we're seeing some extra people there. They've got guests on board, so they're not only dealing with the racing, sailing their boat, but they're keeping their guests safe and in the safest place, explaining what's happening and giving them the ride of their lives.
I mean, it certainly will be, won't it? I mean, looking at Kevin Escoffia there, he's got his waterproofs on, and when the helm starts putting their waterproofs on from that cover position, you know that you're going to get wet. You can see now that the positions in this race are starting to stretch. We know there are light winds, we know that there are big gusts, and we've seen boats sailing, making some mistakes around these import courses before, but at the moment, Team Holcim PRB in the lead with 11th Hour Racing Team in second, Guyo Environment Team Europe in third. Right now, well, there's a bit of a difference there. Well, let us go down to the racecourse and have a little bit of a listen to Sam on board the racetrack.
So what happened was we are lining up to do the run into the start, and Paul it's really hard to see everything, and the boats are all really close.
It must be so hard for Sam here.
Didn't see, and anyway, couldn't avoid the buoy, which was not the start buoy, it was one of the 2, 3 and 4 buoys.
That must be so hard.
When he did see it, there was other boats were close to us. So luckily it's not a hard buoy, and we weren't going really fast at the time. But we got stuck on it with our D0, and obviously with the start in 2 days' time, the main priority was just to get off the buoy before we had any damage. We were keen to try and carry on racing. We could have picked Anthony up from the buoy, but someone picked him up and put him on board, and that means we had outside assistance, so we would be disqualified from the race. So because we were rubbing the D0 on the buoy and the foil did hit the buoy, we're going to go in as quick as possible to check everything. I don't think there's any damage, but just to check everything before the start on Sunday. So this is really disappointing because it's a great race out there.
Well, we were hoping that Biotherm would get themselves untangled from that buoy and be able to join in the import race, but there we go, confirmation from Sam Davies on board. And Dee, I mean, it is the import race, it's not the leg start, but that's not what you want.
No, and you could hear the devastation in her voice. The conditions are just perfect for these boats out here, as we're seeing. I mean, look at them flying along. And that's what Biotherm wanted to be part of. So their frustration must be really annoying. But as she said, the rules are the rules. And also that potential damage to the foil, they want to know that everything's okay, because we've got that leg start just 2 days away.
And they're not going to be the only boat in the import trophy that scores no points for an import race. That was Team Holcim PRB. It's 11th Hour Racing Team who have been doing pretty nicely out in the water right now, but they're just not quite holding the speed of Team Holcim PRB. Yes, it was 11th Hour Racing Team who lost out at the pin end, but Kevin Escoffier extended from that windward position off the start line, and they have been absolutely pushing forward the whole way. Now, earlier on I said thought it was Sam Goodchild on the bow, but actually that is Abby Ehler, the ocean race extraordinaire. I think this is her 4th ocean race, just with those eyes forward, looking out potentially for breeze, but certainly for the marks and any boats as well on the course. And now another jibe, hopefully going smoothly. Team Holcim PRB yet to make any mistakes.
Another good jibe there, so that would have been good. Now Abby's not only looking out for the boats, but she's calling the distance to the mark and actually calling that ley line, because they're trying to get one jibe and get it right so they clear the next mark. So she would have been calling that down, and then on her words they would have gone for that manoeuvre.
Amazing how much these boats slow down and then kick right back up to full speed once the jibe is completed. 11th Hour Racing Team reaching hard now over the top, getting towards Mark 1, and they need... Now, right at this point, Dee, I mean, I think if you're an Amoca geek, shall we say, both foils are in the water, and actually both are being used. They seem to be foiling on both of them.
Yeah, they have achieved liftoff there, I think we could say quite safely. But it's the consistency that they're struggling with a little bit. And that's that speed at the start so they can control the course that was missing. But you can see with them on the course, they're sailing a nice clean race. They're taking that inside line and the shortest distance every time.
Don't be fooled here. They have just gone round a rib because Mark 1, which should be in that position, is just drifting out of position. The breeze probably just pulling it off its anchor. So the race control is fairly standard in sailing, putting a rib there just to signify where it should be. Team 11th Hour Racing Team now jibing over. Those J2s, the particular sail they're using on the front, making those manoeuvres quite easy. Now just trying to find the correct angle. 11th Hour Racing Team could be going faster here, but if they wanted to turn closer to the breeze and get going, they would sail a much greater distance, zigzagging down to the bottom. Team Holcim PRB have been stretching the whole way. So 11th Hour Racing Team might be happy here with the second place. It's certainly a good result. But for Charlie Enright, if this was a question of speed, right now Kevin Escoffier has got the edge. Guyot Environment Team Europe, right now they are slow. This is where the cruelty of the breeze. It's there for their competitors, and then, well, Robert Stanczyk and Benjamin Dutroux don't get the gust.
They are fighting. No way!
can hear the frustration in Benjamin's voice there when he was just saying, and they're foiling and we're not. The frustration is there, just that short distance between the two boats, and there's a different wind speed.
Team Militia are to leeward, foiled in to leeward, and Guyot Environment Team Europe are having to sail very high here. Now, there is a little bit of a question mark here because Guyot Environment Team Europe have sailed high because they are going to where Mark 1 was. Team Militia are rounding where Mark 1 is now. That's the drifted position. So you can see that's the difference between Guyot Environment Team Europe and Boris Herman's Team Militia. Exactly what the race control are going to make of that, we will have to wait and see. But that was not all down to the difference in speed. It wasn't just the foiling of Team Militia. They were sailing to, well, different marks.
So we saw then on the little team dial there that the boat speed went right down to 6 knots on the jibe. They're now accelerating, and now they're coming back onto that powerful reach on Militia, so the speed will just be building and building as they round this mark. But your comment there, Niall, about the mark moving, I think is going to be discussion to have.
You can see it in the background. You can see it in the background. They're just being pulled out of the way by the race control team. I mean, it's not unusual in sailing to have marks move. There are contingencies in the rules, and the important thing is that's communicated to the teams. But clearly Guyot Environment Team Europe thought they were doing the right thing. Of course Team Militia did as well, but that's going to be a discussion for later. Right now it's all about getting themselves up to speed with Team Holcim PRB still in the lead, 11th Hour Racing Team in second place, and this fleet starting to get stretched out here with Team Militia in third, Guyot Environment Team Europe in fourth, and of course Biotherm heading back to port after not being able to start after tangling up with one of the course marks before the start.
That distance there between the boats is really lovely and clear as they come into this next mark. You can really see that each boat is not under pressure to do a manoeuvre at the mark. They can take their time, they can pick their ley line and do a nice, simple, clean manoeuvre, and they shouldn't lose any speed.
Right now, as we go on board with Team Militia, PRB, some smiles from the guests. And I've got to say, at the moment, they don't look too wet as well.
I think that may be deceiving, actually.
11 knots right now for Team Holcim PRB, and that is slow. Fast for any other boat, but slow for these boats right now. This is a chance for the guests on board to kind of catch their breath. And interesting, I was going to say just before we went on board that, well, Kevin Escoffier was sailing slightly high of the mark earlier, and now is having to come down to go back to it, but the breeze isn't quite there. That's why the speeds are down, and I'm guessing, just when you want that gust to take you down, it's not quite there. But looking now from the back end of the reach forward, we have got Team Militia on the left-hand side of your picture and Guyot Environment Team Europe on the right-hand side as the helicopter sweeps over the front. And Guyot Environment Team Europe trying to find some power now, and they have sailed a little bit lower from the last mark. They've set up on this bottom reach lower. That means they've got the opportunity to come high. But Team Holcim PRB, yes, they approach this final mark slow, but they're safely onto the upwind leg, still in first. Well, the breeze out in the racecourse at the moment, patchy. We knew that was going to be, well, certainly a risk for Table Bay. Dee, you've sailed here, you've raced, you've done imports in the ocean race here before. It is, at one level it might be quite frustrating, but it's an enjoyable place to compete.
Oh, it's like a fun survival test. It really is all or nothing, all of the time. And it's not only the wildlife, the other boats, the wind shifts, the accelerations, but there's also a level of seaweed and kelp in the water as well. So there's just so many variables to think of while you're out there. And then you've got to think of where the competition is and line yourself up to do the perfect course. So it really is a test for these sailors.
All while, of course, your heart rate is up at about 180 beats per minute. Well, out on the racecourse at the moment, following the action, we've actually got Mark Towell, the CEO of 11th Hour Racing Team. Mark, let's go to you. What's the latest out there on the racetrack?
Hey guys, I'm down here just next to Mark 4, watching Holcim get ready to come around the mark. They're doing a great job here. The breeze is picking up and looks quite stable for the next reach, so it should be quite interesting to see how they go. I think all the teams are working hard at the big transition between the leeward mark and the windward mark here. And it'll be interesting to see how the teams fare.
Obviously, Mark Towell out there on the water, and I'm sure as 11th Hour Racing Team go past that rib, he's going to give them an extra big cheer, being CEO of the team. But I think, Dee, I mean, he's absolutely right to say that the teams right now, the challenge for the teams right now is just the breeze. It almost feels like the positioning, the order on the race course has kind of been established. It's just a question of whether they're going to throw it away. If Team Holcim PRB can keep going at this speed, no one's really going to reel them in.
There shouldn't be a way to let anybody else in. The distance between the boats is pretty much, as you say, established the order. It's about not making mistakes. And you can get overexcited and get carried away because you think, oh, I'm good. And then you do one silly mistake and it can disappear so quickly, as we've seen, especially the speeds these boats are doing.
Of course, you're absolutely right, because I'm jinxing it, because as you said earlier, there's a lot of kelp on the racetrack. And actually, Team Milizia in one of the Pro-Ams was doing a speed run, picked up an enormous, I mean, almost like a double bed size floating bag of kelp. And they had to protect their foils. They needed to stop. So confirmation from the race control team that they are moving Mark 1 back to its original position. So what we were saying earlier, Dee, was right. It had drifted. How that plays out with Team Milizia and Guyot Environment Team Europe, we will have to wait and see. But look at the dark patch on the water. 11th Hour Racing Team going upwind at the moment in comparatively light winds. But at the top right-hand side of your screen, Team Milizia blasting through that gust with Guyot Environment Team Europe behind. I bet Benjamin Dutroux and Robert Stanczyk, they will be feeling cheated a little bit here, and they will be desperately trying to chase down Boris Herrmann. But it looks like Team Milizia is finding the speed.
Really good now, but it's all about the manoeuvres, as we've seen. That's where the wins and the losses are made. And Guyot Environment are going to be putting pressure on them to try and make them make a mistake. They're coming into the mark now.
Team Milizia round, and it's a close rounding. The only other boat that we've seen do a rounding that tight, well, I mean, on paper, certainly the rounding that you want was 11th Hour Racing Team, but it does sacrifice a little bit of speed. But it looks like Team Milizia round, comfortable. That J2 is in, both foils out and deployed. That seems to be the norm for the import race. There's so few winches inside the cockpit, so a few opportunities to actually control all the various mechanisms on board this boat. You leave both foils out and you just take those out of the equation. 11th Hour Racing Team on that top reach right now. They've only just started on that top reach, and they haven't quite got the breeze right now. They are approaching that start-finish line, but look at the boat in the lead. This is what 11th Hour Racing Team can see, but they see it from the back. Team Holcim PRB with Kevin Escoffier as skipper is in the breeze that everybody wants right now. They are over halfway along that top reach, and the difference in pressure around the racetrack. Guyot Environment Team Europe now rounding the bottom, finishing off that bottom reach. They look like, I mean, they're not being able to close down on Team Milizia at the moment.
Well, we're on board with Guyot Environment Team Europe, and we're hoping we won't see that frustration in Benjamin. We're hoping he's going to stay calm, just go for the clean manoeuvres and still try and wait for that weather to come back. He wants to get in that dark patch, get that acceleration. You can see they're a little bit slow here. That will add to his frustration. But I'm sure they're going to keep going. They've got a nice manoeuvre now. They're on the upwind section, so they've just got to cool that ley line as they can take it into the next mark.
I mean, you're an experienced skipper. You've sailed on crew boats. You know, you've sailed on 2 crew boats in the ocean race. What's it like as a skipper trying to keep your cool when things aren't going your way? Or indeed, for Team Holcim PRB, when things are going your way? What kind of atmosphere do you try and generate on board?
Well, it's just that atmosphere of focus, I think, because even when things are going really well, you want everybody to stay concentrated, because it's too easy to get overexcited. You know, Holcim PRB here, you can see Abby screaming at somebody to get out of the way because they want the clear air, they want to do a clean manoeuvre. Everyone else behind us probably asking her to give that information. But you don't want to get overexcited, and equally you don't want to get your head down because then it's really hard to pull everybody up. So keep everyone focused, keep them concentrating on the job at hand. The race isn't over until you cross that finish line.
And that finish line for Team Holcim PRB is less than 1 lap away. Kevin Escoffier at the moment around about 15, 16 knots of boat speed, but you can see how they have elected. Once again, we saw this on that first lap. They've elected to extend a long way past Mark 1 before they go for the jibe, perhaps just hunting a little bit more breeze and coming in on a slightly tighter angle into Mark 2. That's going to keep a little bit of speed up. Get that J2 across. I don't like seeing little moments like that where you don't know whether it's just an easy problem. I mean, it could be, you know, a big tangle in the ropes. It's going to be the only thing, if those sheets were to foul in the cockpit, it's pretty much the only thing really that could scupper this potential top points for the import race.
How the tables have turned from Alicante Import to see Holcim's PRB at the top there. They're not going to let this go, that's for sure. And I think their decision of taking those really wide ley lines is paying for them because they're not losing as much boat speed. The shorter course is great, but the others have struggled with boat speed a little bit.
Mark 1 has been moved to its original position. I repeat, Mark 1 has been moved back to its original position.
Confirmation again that the marks are back in position. Team Militia right now on the verge of foiling. The speed around 15 knots, and it just need a little bit more of a push. There it goes, 16, and you see that bow coming up, and you can see inside now with Will Harris and Axel Pilon on the pumps, and what they're trying to do there is they're trying to tune the J2 as the speed comes up, and they're hitting their marks because as the speed comes up, they're able to keep the power on. I won't go into the details here, Dee, but essentially you go faster, the wind angle changes, and you've got an awful lot of work to do. Nico Lundgren on the helm, a very unusual helming position on board Team Militia, but it does mean that Nico Lundgren, who's got his hand on the tiller, has got a good view of that forward sail.
Yeah, he's got great visibility and he knows where he's taking the boat to. And actually for a navigator, it's quite nice for him to get outside, his head out in the spray and have a hold of the helm. Great boat speed from 11th Hour Racing here as they come into that Mark 9, over 20 knots. And they're going to be, again, taking it wide before they pull that ley line for that next manoeuvre.
Now, a question for Charlie Enright and Simon Fisher, Justine Matru, and the rest of the sailors on board 11th Hour Racing team is, when do you jibe? They're in pressure, or indeed they've just sailed out for it. So is an early jibe a better manoeuvre here to get themselves back into that gust? There's clearly a bit of wind funneling down at this section of the course, but there's also some big lulls as well. For the moment, I think just doing those extra manoeuvres, they can't really see the benefit. Team Holcim PRB have got a good gap, but just look how much speed, and now they go for it. Now they go for the jibe. So 11th Hour Racing team jibing far earlier than Kevin Escoffier and Team Holcim PRB, perhaps in search of the wind that they've just sailed out of.
I think that was driven by the wind conditions there. You saw how slow they were as they went into that manoeuvre, and now they're pretty much having to work really hard to try and get back up to any speed at all there.
This is going to be tricky for 11th Hour Racing team, but look at the race behind them. It was at this point of the course, last lap, that Team Militia sailed to where the drifting mark was. Guyot Environment Team Europe sailed to the original position. That extra distance for Benjamin Dutroux and Robert Stanczyk put them into 4th place in this race. Right now, Guyot Environment Team Europe are to windward, the left-hand side of your screen. But to get down from there with any meaningful progress, they are going to need some breeze. And you can watch their course. They will be turning down towards the right-hand side of the picture whenever they get a gust. They might be left there a little bit high if indeed the wind doesn't come.
We can see on the water there's just 2 dark paddles where those acceleration zones are, and then it gets a lot lighter, which shows that the wind is actually decreasing. So if they sail too far, they're going to risk a really slow boat speed.
And I think that's what they're doing right now, aren't they? They've decided this is the best that it's going to be. And Guyot Environment Team Europe are sailing low and slow. They know that they need to get down now, because if they don't, doing it later is going to be even worse. However, for the moment, it does leave Team Militia in 3rd place, ahead of Robert Stanczyk and Benjamin Dutroux. On board now with Team Militia. Boris Herman in the helming position, but not with a hand on the tiller.
So you can hear Nico Lumpen there telling Will how long he's got to go before they do the manoeuvre, where the mark is, so Will can start setting it up because he's inside feeding all his lines on all the winches. Nico's got his eyes out, and Boris there was looking for the wind, looking for the shifts, looking for the pressure to make sure that they were trying to sail in the best bit of water.
Well, right behind Team Militia is Guyot Environment Team Europe, and I can't quite make out the facial expressions of Benjamin Dutroux at the back of the boat, but I'm sure he is staring daggers at Team Militia. And we know that there's going to be some discussion about what went on the second lap. But for the moment, as we go on board with Guyot Environment Team Europe, if they want to catch Team Militia, they need to do it quick.
Scratch
Big
of the head
thing
there.
here. Yeah, and the big thing is
I
what you
feel
just
we are
do
like
not...
B16 without Spinnaker.
It's difficult here, dear. I'm trying to judge the mood on board. The one thing you don't want to happen is you don't want this boat to just be resigned to their position in the racetrack. You know, just hold out hope, because there are still plenty of corners to go, and we've seen plenty of boats in the Ocean Race park up in Table Bay while everyone else sails around them just, 50 metres to the left or right.
Absolutely, and you could see there they had guests on board. He's keeping them entertained, but he was still really concentrating on what was going on, what the other boat was doing, what the wind was doing, what his boat speed was. So he's always thinking, what's next? Where can I take the advantage? When will it come? How can we do it? So he was still concentrating, but they will have had an absolute blast out there today. These conditions are amazing.
Now, by my eye, I do think that Team Holston PRB has lost a little bit of that lead. It's still massive, as you can see from the 3D tracker, but their speed is a little bit down on this bottom reach. Normally at this point we'd be expecting to see them in the high teens and just stretching away, but they haven't been able to do that so far. Now the breeze comes in and perhaps they can get their speed ticking upwards, but it does mean that at the moment 11th Hour Racing Team in second place have been able to close the gap. But is it too little too late? For Kevin Escoffier on board Team Holston PRB, he is eyeing up the mark at the end of this bottom reach. Then it's just the short upwind, the tack, and then the reach through the finish line. So we have got barely 10%, maybe 5% of this racetrack left to run. So for Team Holston PRB, I mean, you could almost come off the throttle at this point and still be confident.
These boats don't want to be sailed slowly. They want to be full bore the whole time, and that's what they want to do. Give it the ride. They know that they've kind of secured this victory. As you say, I don't want to tempt fate here, but the distance that they have on 11th Hour Racing Team will be held, unless they make a mistake or something terrible happens. So they should just need to be concentrating on clean execution for the rest of this race. I think it actually looks like the boat speed's down all the way around the course. That wind's dropped a little bit.
Or at least rolling over the boats, not quite finding their sails. 11th Hour Racing Team in second place, got the breeze at the moment. The bow is starting to come up as they get themselves foiling, but they're having to steer high of this mark here. This is the mark that means the end of that bottom reach, and 11th Hour Racing Team are taking that power that comes with sailing away from it. They need to bear away. They do a little bit there, and all of this time Holston PRB is sailing a little bit slower ahead. So yet again the meters tick down and the lead slightly shrinks for Kevin Escoffier. You can see they've happened to bear away, come away from the wind and sailing a little bit slower into that mark. It's not going to be enough at this point, the charge of Charlie Enright, to worry Kevin Escoffier. We have only got the short upwind to go, and then just that tiny fraction of a reach across the finish line. But they do need to keep moving.
Yeah, and let's not forget that upwind section is slow. That's the slowest part of this whole course, as they're slower in boat speed. They've got to do that tack, and then they only get that very short distance to the finish line to accelerate. So they're going to be frustrated because everybody else will be closing down as these guys now come on the breeze. But all the teams have got to go through that section, so they won't lose heart. They'll keep faith. Abbey will call a great lay line for the tack, and they'll be into the finish, I hope.
Team Holston PRB still in the lead with 11th Hour Racing Team in second place. Team Militia in third, a long way back, and Guyot Environment Team Europe in fourth as we get into the final closing stages of the Cape Town import race presented by V&A Waterfront. And I mean, Dee, we were saying that the breeze was good, but of course Table Bay yet again, just when you think, oh, there's a gust, I can ride it all the way, I mean, it comes on and it goes off incredibly quickly.
It does, and every now and again we've seen that backdrop of Table Mountain, but obviously Lion's Head, and that's where we have those acceleration zones and those huge wind shadows. So the shifts and the accelerations and decelerations of the wind really keep the sailors on their toes. But I think second place here with 11th Hour Racing.
11th Hour Racing team in second place, heading towards that bottom mark, and they have been hoping on this bottom reach to try and close down the distance with Team Wholesome PRB. Charlie Enright has done a really nice job, but it was almost right as the clock ticked down for those final few seconds. That distance has closed up, and Team Wholesome, there you can see that white streak behind them, that perfect blue water, and there is the next mark for them. Rounding there and turning up, and in the distance we have got Team Milizia and Guyot Environment Team Europe. And is it just my eye, or is the water there a little bit darker? These two boats in third and fourth got a chance to finish off this bottom reach in a little bit of style. 11th Hour Racing team now round to the bottom. The speed slows, and if anything, I would say that wind has shifted. They're already on an upwind course. We can expect to see them tacking quite soon, but the speed really dropping there for Charlie Enright.
Well, a clear sign that speed's dropped was the fact that people were just stood up walking around on the bow then to take the photos. Normally they're trying to hold on.
11th Hour Racing team, and as we pull back now, you can see, well, two things. One, their objective, which is the final turning mark, Mark 12, and also their rival, Team Wholesome PRB. Kevin Escoffier on board Team Wholesome PRB is about to turn round this last turn, the left-hand turn, port rounding, and then the reach into the finish. There were moments where Kevin Escoffier looked a little bit slow. There were moments where 11th Hour Racing team tried to close down, but I think at this point right now, with just a bear away, not a tack to go, a safe manoeuvre of a bear away, as long as those foils are clear of that mark. I don't want to jinx anything here for the team, but Team Wholesome PRB now round, and Abby Ehler on the bow pointing towards the finish line, and this really is the turnaround from Alicante.
I wonder if their guest today, being the Mayor of Cape Town, had something to do with this. Maybe he has some local knowledge in the bay, and he's told the sailors on Wholesome PRB exactly where they should be going.
We wondered whether the boats in third and fourth were going to get a little bit more breeze, and they do on that bottom reach. Team Milizia with that bow up. You can see just how much it takes to get that boat fully foiling. It is up. That foil is, well, it's making lift, but not really enough to get the whole boat up. And when they ride in that kind of wheelie position, looks great. It's not really fast.
I'm really wanting Will to look out the leeward window so he can see the leech line on his jib. He really needs to tighten that up if he gets the chance.
There we go. Once the coach, always the coach. So there's top tips there for Will Harris. We'll put that one in the debrief. But this really is the big story. Kevin Escoffier and Team Wholesome PRB. It was a phenomenal start off that line, stealing the breeze of everybody. And now they cross the finish line in the Cape Town import race presented by V&A Waterfront, and they take the maximum 5 points. Quite the turnaround from their performance at the first import race in Alicante.
Local influence from the Mayor being the guest on board. They're going to be very happy. He's going to be delighted with a great result with the team he was riding with today. And what a nice way to go into the weekend ahead of Sunday for that team.
Yeah, I mean, we should point out that the guests on board aren't allowed to sail. They're not actually allowed to kind of, do anything. But I'm absolutely confident that the guests on board Team Wholesome PRB will take that victory and wear it with pride, because they always do. They are out there on the water enjoying themselves. And in fact, I said they weren't allowed to sail, but look at that. There is the Mayor of Cape Town on the helm. Kevin Escoffier letting him helm this boat, and I think the smile says it all. They are through the finish line. This is just showboating now across as Sam Goodchild puts his head out of that leeward cockpit hole, and I'm guessing D, cooling down. They've probably been working really hard in that cockpit.
Absolutely. I think you will have noticed there were some deep breaths coming out of Sam Goodchild there, having a bit of a pant. He would have been working really hard. All those manoeuvres take a lot of grinding, moving those sails, getting the boat foiling. You know, you talk about the person on the bow calling the lines, communicating clearly. They're getting nailed by any water, but they're not inside grinding. So there's always a payoff for which position you choose to be on in this team.
11th Hour Racing team round that final turning mark now. The finish line just in front of them. First place already going to Team Holcim PRB, but second place for Charlie Enright. And for 11th Hour Racing team, another second place after the import race in Alicante. And there's the breeze, there's the foiling, there's the speed for the Americans, with both the windward and leeward foil in the water, the boat lifting up easily. And coming into view is the finish line. And this is a good result here, I think, Dee. I mean, ultimately, the first part of this race, Charlie Enright and 11th Hour Racing team were a little bit off the pace compared with Team Holcim PRB, but that's certainly that last lap. They were able to claw back a few metres, and I think they'll take some confidence in 2 second places in the import series. So far, so good for this team.
It shows absolute consistency, domination of what their boat's doing and how they're doing it. They're very confident in how they do things, what decisions they make and how they execute them. I think if Charlie just works on his speed at the start, I think they're going to be real competitors for leading these import races. 2 second places is not a bad place to be.
No, not at all. And of course, as you say, consistency and that confidence, that coordination of the crew work, because they were the only team that were able to perform tactical manoeuvres. Remember, they stole the inside position on Guyot Environment Team Europe.
Yeah, and let's not forget that those people on Guyot Environment Team Europe are Olympians. They don't let people in easily. So Charlie did really well to get in the side. And we've got Boris Herman now with Milizia. They're coming round. They're going to take 3rd place in this import race.
A 3rd place for Team Milizia. They were, sitting in an incredible position on the finish line in Alicante for that import race. They were so strong. They had such a leg ahead in Alicante. It wasn't quite the same here in Cape Town, in different conditions. It was those light, fickle breeze that Boris Herman was able to exploit all the way back in the Spanish city. But now here in Cape Town, a 3rd place finish for Boris Herman and Team Milizia, and that's looking pretty good. And for Boris Herman as well, stepping back on board. You've got to remember, he hasn't really been racing this boat, at all over, the last four weeks maybe?
That's right, and it's really hard when you're off the boat and you're watching your tracker and watching your boat from a distance. It's never the same. So he'll have really been happy to get the wind and the water over him and get a feel for his boat again ahead of Sunday. Get a feel for his crew and how they manage the boat without him, and how he's back, how he slots into that routine is really important. But also, let's not forget Rosalind's poorly today, so they had Axel Pillion on board, and that will have been a bit of a baptism of fire for her to come straight on board for an import race.
Straight on board for an import race, and an import race in breeze, in lulls, in gusts, with a little bit of everything. Foils, rake on, rake off, sails coming on and off. But all of the lessons that these teams have learned out there as we watch Team Milizia crossing the line in 3rd place, all of the lessons here, they are going to be replayed on Sunday, because the offshore leg starts with a course pretty similar to this.
And that is really hard work, I can assure you. The last thing you want to do is get really distracted from what lays ahead by having to turn lots of corners. You get hot, you get confused, your boat's all upside down, and then you've got to head off down the coast for what is going to be the longest leg in history. So it's going to be a real tough day for these sailors on Sunday, and I've had a sneaky peek at some of the weather that they're going to go into, and it's not going to be for the faint-hearted.
No, it starts off pretty tough, so they'll be pleased that after the racing today, they can go ashore, fix anything, get themselves reset for Guyot Environment Team Europe. They potentially have a little bit more to do on shore, because there is still, certainly in my mind, a question mark about what we saw on the racetrack between them and Team Milizia going into that mark. We haven't yet had a confirmation as to exactly what might have happened out there. And I know for Guyot Environment Team Europe, as they come across the finish line, coming across right at that windward end of that finish line, Benjamin Dutroux certainly likes sailing to windward on this reach. Now they come across and take 4th place. We won't be waiting for 5th. Biofirm got themselves tangled up in a mark. They won't be coming across the finish line. In fact, they didn't even start this import race, unfortunately. But for this team and Team Milizia, well, let's just say they will be coming together on shore to discuss who got it right.
I'm sure race director Phil Lawrence will be involved in that conversation where some questions will be asked, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sporting events around the world, they're not immune to the occasional curveball, shall we say. And certainly for our teams here in Cape Town, this race provided it with that mark drifting across the racetrack. So Guyot Environment Team Europe coming across the finish line in 4th place. That rounds up our finishers. Biotherm safely ashore now, having not started this race after tangling with a mark. And Guyot Environment Team Europe, you can see the guests on board. It's amazing indeed to see the difference in ergonomics with the boat. This boat, much older boat, I think it was 2015 that it came out of the mould. And when you compare that with some of the other boats, very different. I mean, there's a really good example with Team Milizia, Boris Herman just standing up out of the window. And all of these boats very different here. And all of them needing to take their own lessons as we make our way back in. And we've actually got an interview now. We can hear from the man himself, Kevin Escoffier, on board Team Holcim PRB after that impressive win here for the Cape Town import race.
How do you feel right now?
Oh, happy, you know, we had a bad one in Alicante, so I think it's good. It's good to be back with the win here. Very happy, very happy.
How was the race course?
We had a very good start, and then I think we had to go fast. We've been doing safe maneuvers, going straight and fast, so definitely it was a very shifty win with Table Mountain behind us. Look how it's beautiful, and now we have to enjoy the win and to enjoy the view with the skipper of the city.
What was our fastest speed?
A very happy Kevin Escoffier on board Team Holcim BRB and T. I mean, you heard it there. They're pretty happy to do one better than they did in Alicante.
Absolutely. I mean, they turned it on their head, so it's fantastic. But I did laugh there. The first question the mayor was asking, what was our top speed? He obviously felt the exhilaration, but obviously not being behind the instruments, didn't know how fast it was. So he's really keen to find out how fast they went today.
Well, this race here, the Cape Town import race presented by V&A Waterfront, is just one piece of the puzzle of the 14th edition of the Ocean Race. We have already seen some quite fantastic action over previous legs. This global racetrack stretching from corner to corner around the world. Well, this was the moment at the beginning of the race with Biotherm hooking themselves up on that mark. This wasn't the starting mark, but that pushed them right the way out of the race. And it was Team Holcim PRB that got not just their timing, but their speed absolutely perfect. That top reach, absolutely wonderful foiling for Kevin Escoffier and the team. The beginning half of this race certainly seemed to feature a little bit more breeze, and 11th Hour Racing Team looking tidy around the racetrack, finding the opportunity to come wide in and tight out from those marks, gaining those small margins of tactical positioning and speed where it was needed. Charlie Enright skippering another boat that clearly found some speed, but it was Team Holcim PRB that was certainly the boat to beat. They were unstoppable lap after lap and crossed the finish line in first place to take maximum points here in Cape Town for the import race. Well, we are not finished yet for the action in Cape Town. Of course, this is the import race, but we have got some phenomenal sailing coming up here on Sunday. We will be live, and, well, the question is, what kind of leg are we going to be pushing our sailors into?
I've never been to the Southern Ocean, but probably the longest downwind I will ever race in my life.
The southern leg will be the longest one, and it's what I love to do.
It's kind of one of those things which is just pretty relentless. You don't get to stop from it when you want.
IMOCA is like a Formula One. It's very fragile.
It's a leap into the unknown. Pushing to the limit.
Living all together in a little space like this would be probably really hard.
It's cold, it's snowing and windy, and you think about it, it's like, why am I doing this?
There's always fear.
If you fall overboard, you're dead.
It's too cold.
And of course, that is to come, starting on Sunday here in Cape Town. But for the moment, today is wrapped up. What an incredible race that we have had out there. Confirmation of the points awarded for the positions. Team Holcim PRB with Kevin Escoffier taking first place and 5 points. An 11th Hour Racing team taking second with Team Milizia in third. And Guyot Environment, Team Europe in fourth. That is the positions coming from race control. So certainly that's how they see that disagreement about where that mark was between the German team and the European team with Benjamin Dutroux. Biotherm Racing, 0 points as Paul Mayer hooking up that mark on the racetrack and unfortunately unable to join the other boats out on the racetrack today.
So we're looking forward to resting after this, checking our boats, and then looking forward to that leg start on Sunday. It brings my hairs on end at the thought of what they're going into. Can't wait to wish them on their way.
It's certainly going to be a pretty spectacular start if today was anything to go by. My thanks to you, Dee, for joining me for commentary, and for Mark Towell out in the water, who was able to sort of give us a little bit of an update as to what was going on out there. Cape Town, yet again, as it has done for 12 of our 14 editions of the Ocean Race, delivering great sailing, but of course plenty of challenges as well. And the race continues on Sunday. Our sailors a short chance to rest before the Ocean Race begins again.